Okay, so today you guys are going to learn about the cell cycle. And the key concept is that cells have distinct phases of growth, reproduction, and normal function. And then the central question for today is, why do cells divide? So you guys see here, there's different photos of cells that are dividing. So we see one cell that's divided in two, and then we see these different types of cells here that are starting to go through cell division. All right, so why do cells divide? So we have single-celled organisms, and what they do is they divide for reproduction, which is known as asexual reproduction, or basically they produce clones. Multicellular organisms such as ourselves, we divide for growth and development. So from the fertilized egg to an adult, obviously we generate and we grow. For repair and replacement, so we want to replace cells that die from normal wear and tear or from injury, as we see here. So here's a picture of our amoeba. Our amoeba is a single-celled organism, and this here will divide in the process of mitosis. So it'll divide to make more copies of itself. Here we see fertilization. So we see one cell, two cells going on to many cells. And then we also have our starfish here. And as we see our starfish, they have the ability to lose their appendage and then regrow that. Okay. Same thing with our lizards. If a lizard loses its tail, it retains the ability for it to divide, which is kind of cool. If we have that ability, that means that if we lost a finger, we'd be able to regenerate it, but we don't, sadly. All right, dividing cells. So what has to be copied? So before a cell can actually divide, you have to copy the DNA, copy the organelles, copy the cell membrane, and then some other molecules such as our enzymes. Once everything here is copied, then the cell can divide. All right, the cell cycle has four main stages. So the cell cycle is a regular pattern of growth, DNA replication, and cellular division. So we go through interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. So the main stages of the cell cycle are the gap1, synthesis, gap2, and mitosis phases. All right. Now, the gap1 is cell growth and normal functions. So during this time right here, the cell is basically growing and it's working for you. It's doing its everyday functions. Then the cell will go into what's known as the S phase, or the DNA synthesis. So during the S phase, the DNA makes a copy of itself. Once it copies itself, it then enters in the G2 phase. So the cell is going to continue to grow. The G1, the S, and the G2 phase all belong to this phase called interphase. Once it passes through these three steps, it will then get ready to divide. And it divides through the process of what's called mitosis. Mitosis includes division of the cell's nucleus and division of the cell cytoplasm, also called cytokinesis. So mitosis is when the cell divides, when it divides its nucleus, and cytokinesis is when it actually separates itself. Okay. So mitosis can occur only if the cell is large enough and the DNA is undamaged. Okay. So if the DNA is undamaged during the S phase, so when the DNA is making a copy of itself, it has to be perfect. We don't make any imperfections. We make imperfections, we fix them. To give you an idea of how cells divide, so the frequency of cell division varies with each cell type. For example, your skin cells divide frequently throughout your life. So you're consistently replacing your skin cells. The younger you are, the faster the cell reproduction rate occurs. The older you are, the longer it takes for these cells to divide. And that's why people get wrinkles. Your liver cells retain the ability to divide, but you keep it in reserve. So what that means is your liver will function perfectly. Now, if anything happens to it, it has the ability to divide and fix itself. Okay. Mature nerve cells and muscle cells never divide after maturity. So if you have any sort of damage to your nerve or muscle cells, they don't fix themselves. That's why there's people that are paraplegic or quadriplegic. So meaning that they lose the ability to walk, and that's because their nerve has been severed. All right, so the rate of cell division varies with the need for those types of cells as we see here. So you replace your skin cells about every 2 weeks, your red blood cells about every 4 months, your liver cells about every 300 to 500 days. The internal lining of your intestines, so that would be about every 4 to 5 days, and then the muscles around your intestines around every 16 years. Now, some cells go into a non-dividing phase, and that's known as the G0 phase. So G0 is a non-dividing stage, and most human cells are in a G0 phase. So it's a resting phase, and what we mean by a resting phase, meaning that it's not allowed to divide, okay? It doesn't enter into mitosis. So for example, your liver cells are in G0. Now G0 is a working phase, but they could be called back to the cell cycle by external cues. So like we said, if something damaged happened to your liver, then this here will go back into the G1 phase and then start mitosis. The other one are your nerve and muscle cells. They're highly specialized cells and they stay in G0 forever and then they never divide. So they're consistently in this phase here. So they're never allowed to divide. They can't fix themselves. Now, surface area must allow for adequate exchange of materials. So cell growth is coordinated with division. Cells that must be large have unique shapes. This here is a picture of a red blood cell. Notice the shape, how it's different than this cell. This here is a nerve cell. Did you see here, what do we see the difference? See that this one here is more circular. It's circular because it has to fit through your arteries and veins. Whereas this here has like a lot of this like wiring. And if you look at your nerves, these here are like your messages. So the main centralized message comes here and it goes through like these wires that are attached to your muscles. And this here is bone cells. So we could see how these cells are very highly condensed to each other. All right, in the next activity, what you guys will do is you guys are going to watch the video and explain the cell cycle and what happens when it is not regulated. So that'll be in the next activity after this, okay? All right, hopefully you learned something new.